Have you ever noticed that the deeper you think, the lonelier you feel? The more you understand, the less others seem willing to listen. And no, this isn't just something in your head. Society has always been wary of deep thinkers, not because they're wrong, but because they see what most people don't want to face. History is full of examples. From Socrates to Nietzsche, from Galileo to Tesla, brilliant minds have often been mocked, silenced, or ignored, not because they lacked intelligence, but because their very presence made people uncomfortable. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers, went so far as to say intelligence is a curse. He believed that the very act of seeing the world clearly isolates you. But why? Why does society resist those who think differently? The answer lies deep in human psychology. Think about it for a moment. When you stand next to someone physically stronger, you don't necessarily feel weak. You often admire their strength. When you meet someone wealthy, you might envy their success, but you don't usually feel personally attacked. Yet when you come across someone intellectually superior, something strange happens. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just introduce new ideas, they hold up a mirror to the limitations of those around them. And people don't forgive that easily. Just the presence of a thoughtful, intelligent person can make others feel inadequate, even if no words are spoken. But why? Why does intelligence, more than any other kind of superiority, make people uncomfortable? To understand this, let's look at how our minds process different forms of superiority. Physical strength? It's visible. We associate it with leadership or protection. Wealth? We admire it or aspire to it. These qualities, strength, wealth, beauty, they're external. We recognize them without them shaking the very foundation of who we believe ourselves to be. But intelligence is different. Intelligence ties directly into our identity. We define ourselves by our thoughts, beliefs, and understanding of the world. When we meet someone who thinks on a deeper level or questions what we hold true, it feels like an attack on our very sense of self. Instead of admiration, many people subconsciously resist intelligence, not because the deep thinker is arrogant or dismissive, but because their presence forces others to confront their own limits. That's why, throughout history, deep thinkers have often been pushed to society's edges. Their ideas don't just challenge concepts, they challenge egos. And humans, by nature, will do almost anything to protect their ego from discomfort. Take a moment and reflect on your own experiences. Have you ever tried to bring up a deep or complex idea in casual conversation, only to be met with blank stares or awkward silence? Or noticed how quickly people switch topics when things get too thoughtful? This isn't coincidence. It's a defense mechanism. When people meet a deep thinker, their minds instinctively shift into self-preservation mode. Instead of curiosity, they respond with resistance. Instead of engagement, they dismiss. This is why intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries often find themselves isolated, not because they choose solitude, but because society pushes them away. Interestingly, studies show that confidence is often valued more than intelligence in social settings. People naturally gravitate towards those who project certainty, even if their ideas lack depth. This explains why charismatic yet simplistic thinkers gain more influence than deep thinkers who speak with nuance and complexity. History is full of examples. Populist leaders, motivational speakers, viral influencers. They thrive by telling people what they want to hear, not by challenging them to think critically. Meanwhile, those who question popular beliefs struggle to reach a broad audience. This is the paradox of intelligence. The more someone pursues truth, the more disconnected they become from the majority. The mirror effect doesn't just reflect society's limitations, it shows why society resists change to begin with. But is this just a theory? Is there scientific proof that people actually fear intelligence? Modern neuroscience confirms this. Studies reveal that when people feel intellectually inferior, their brain's amygdala, the region responsible for detecting fear and threats, activates strongly. In simple terms, deep thinking doesn't just intimidate, it triggers a primal survival response, similar to what we experience facing physical danger. Why does intelligence activate the same fear circuits as a physical threat? The answer is rooted in human evolution. For most of our history, survival didn't depend on being the smartest person in the room. It depended on being accepted by the group. Our ancestors lived in tribes where social harmony meant safety. Being rejected by the group often meant death because isolation led to vulnerability. Because of this, our brains are wired to prioritize social acceptance over intellectual pursuit. When a highly intelligent person enters a social setting, they disrupt the tribal balance without meaning to. Their presence challenges existing ideas, social norms, and group dynamics. This triggers the brain's defense mechanisms as if the intelligent person were a potential enemy, not just someone thinking deeply. This explains why many deep thinkers feel isolated, not because they lack social skills, but because their intelligence makes them stand out in a world that values fitting in over standing out. A 2021 study from Stanford University uncovered something even more revealing. The threat deep thinkers provoke depends on context. When interacting one-on-one, people feel less threatened by intellectual depth. But in group settings, the threat response spikes dramatically. Why? Because social status becomes more important in groups. People don't just react to intelligence itself. They react to how others perceive them in comparison. If someone feels outshined by a deep thinker, they instinctively try to undermine or exclude that person to protect their social standing. That's why deep thinkers often find meaningful conversations in private, but struggle in larger social environments. Psychologists have identified several cognitive biases that help explain why intelligence often meets resistance. First, the Dunning-Kruger effect. People with low ability tend to overestimate their intelligence, while highly intelligent people often doubt themselves. This mismatch creates friction. Those who know little believe they know more than they do, leading them to dismiss deep thinkers. Second, status quo bias. Our brains prefer familiar ideas over complex new truths. Intelligence often introduces disruptive thoughts that make people uncomfortable. Third, the backfire effect. When confronted with information contradicting their beliefs, people don't change their minds. They double down on their existing views. Deep thinkers frequently face this when presenting challenging ideas. In today's digital world, social media only amplifies this rejection of intelligence. Algorithms prioritize engagement over depth, meaning controversial or emotionally charged content spreads faster than thoughtful, well-reasoned arguments. Take a look at the most viral content online. Simple, catchy, often misleading sound bites outperform nuanced discussions. The more intellectual someone is, the harder it is for them to compress deep ideas into bite-sized, viral-friendly content. As a result, society increasingly favors entertainment over enlightenment, making it even harder for deep thinkers to find widespread acceptance. So what does all this mean for deep thinkers? The rejection of intelligence isn't just social. It's biological, psychological, and cultural. It's built into human nature, reinforced by group dynamics, and magnified by modern technology. This doesn't mean deep thinkers should stop sharing their ideas. Rather, they need to understand the forces working against them. And if society resists intelligence, what does it actually embrace? The answer is comfort. A world where predictability is preferred over truth. Arthur Schopenhauer, that brutally honest philosopher we mentioned earlier, didn't see intelligence as a gift, but rather as a curse. Unlike others who viewed intelligence as the key to success, Schopenhauer argued that the smarter a person is, the harder it becomes to connect with society. But why is that? Schopenhauer's philosophy centers around a concept he called the will, a blind, irrational force driving all human behavior. According to him, most people live their lives controlled by the will to live. What does that mean? Simply put, they seek pleasure, comfort, and survival above all else. Highly intelligent people, on the other hand, operate differently. Instead of blindly following instincts, they develop what Schopenhauer called the will to truth, an insatiable desire to understand reality, even if it brings discomfort. Think about that contrast. Regular people seek pleasure and avoid difficult truths, while deep thinkers relentlessly seek truth, even if it means pain and isolation. This creates a fundamental disconnect between intellectuals and the rest of society. Where most people find meaning in relationships, entertainment, and routine pleasures, deep thinkers often feel disillusioned by these things, seeing them as distractions from deeper existential questions. Schopenhauer believed that the more a person understands human nature, the harder it is for them to relate to others. Deep thinkers see through lies and deception. Most social interactions involve small talk, status games, and polite dishonesty. Those who value truth over appearance often struggle to participate in these shallow exchanges. They crave depth, but society favors simplicity. Most people prefer surface-level conversations, while deep thinkers yearn for meaningful discussions. This disconnect makes everyday interactions challenging for intellectuals, leaving them feeling bored or disconnected. They recognize the futility behind human desires. Schopenhauer saw desire and ambition as illusions. He argued that most people chase money, power, and relationships, but deep thinkers often question the very purpose of these pursuits. This can make intelligent people appear distant or indifferent to what excites the majority. It's no wonder they often feel misunderstood, alienated, or even resented. Their mere presence forces others to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves, truths most would rather avoid. Schopenhauer compared intelligence to a heightened sense of awareness, a blessing that feels more like a curse. He wrote that a high degree of intellect tends to make a person unsocial. His reasoning was simple. The more you understand, the less you can ignore. The more aware you are of the world's flaws, the harder it is to find happiness in it. In other words, the deeper you think, the lonelier you become. For Schopenhauer, happiness and intelligence were inversely related. He believed that ignorance, not wisdom, was the true key to happiness. This explains why deep thinkers throughout history, like Pascal or Kafka, have often struggled with depression, existential crises, and social isolation. But Schopenhauer didn't stop at diagnosing the problem. He also offered solutions for deep thinkers to cope with their isolation. First, embrace solitude. He didn't see solitude as a punishment, but as a privilege. Deep thinkers should use alone time for intellectual and creative pursuits rather than seeking constant validation from society. Second, find like-minded individuals. Instead of trying to fit into mainstream society, Schopenhauer advised intelligent people to seek those who think like them, whether through books, philosophy, or exclusive intellectual circles. Third, engage with the world wisely. He warned against blindly sharing deep insights with people who aren't ready for them. Instead, thinkers should observe society, learn its patterns, and choose their words carefully. These teachings still resonate today for anyone struggling with social rejection due to their intellect. While intelligence may lead to loneliness, it also grants freedom, wisdom, and a deeper understanding of life. Schopenhauer viewed intelligence as a double-edged sword, a source of both power and pain. It allows you to see reality more clearly, but it also distances you from those who prefer illusions. In the end, his philosophy confirms what many of us suspect. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself, it fears what intelligence reveals. Deep thinkers aren't rejected because they are wrong. They're rejected because they are right too soon. So, if you've ever felt alone in your thoughts, know this. You are not broken. You are simply seeing the world as it really is. But does this mean deep thinkers are doomed to isolation forever? Are there ways to navigate society while preserving intellectual depth? The truth is, society isn't built to embrace deep thinkers. It's built to maintain stability. Most people prefer comfort over truth. That's why shallow conversations, simple ideas, and repetitive content dominate social spaces. But why is comfort prioritized over intellectual depth? Why does society resist change, even when that change leads to progress? The answer lies in how human psychology is wired and how institutions shape our thinking from an early age. At its core, the human brain craves certainty and predictability. Evolution has programmed us to avoid mental discomfort, a phenomenon psychologists call cognitive ease. Cognitive ease means the brain prefers simple, familiar information because it requires less mental effort to process. When an idea is complicated, nuanced, or unfamiliar, the brain perceives it as difficult and potentially dangerous. This is where system justification theory comes in. It explains why people defend the status quo even when it works against them. Instead of questioning authority or outdated beliefs, most prefer to rationalize them because change feels too uncertain. Add groupthink to the mix. People would rather conform to widely accepted beliefs than risk social rejection by challenging them. This explains why the majority rejects intellectual dissent, even when it's based on truth. This deep psychological preference for comfort over complexity is why intellectuals, philosophers, and scientists often struggle to gain mass acceptance, especially during their lifetimes. Look at today's digital world. Who gets the most attention on social media? Not the intellectuals. It's those who can reduce complex ideas into viral, feel-good sound bites. Thought-provoking discussions struggle to gain traction because depth takes time. Meanwhile, viral content is instant, emotional, and easy to digest. Algorithms reward engagement, and nothing engages people more than controversy, outrage, or humor. All of these often sideline rational intellectual discourse. Echo chambers develop where people are exposed only to information reinforcing their existing beliefs, making them resistant to new perspectives. In this environment, deep thinkers who challenge the mainstream narrative often find themselves ignored, misunderstood, or even attacked. This rejection of deep thinking doesn't just happen online. It begins in the institutions that shape our minds. Schools and workplaces are prime examples. Education systems claim to value intelligence, but in reality, they reward obedience over independent thought. Students who memorize and regurgitate information succeed, while those who question or challenge authority are often labeled troublemakers. Workplaces don't always favor the most intelligent or innovative employees. They favor those who culture and maintain existing power structures. In politics, leaders who make bold, unpopular statements rooted in logic often lose to those who tell people what they want to hear. This explains why the most celebrated intellectuals in history were often outcasts during their lifetimes. Their ideas were seen as disruptive rather than valuable. Society claims to value intelligence, innovation, and critical thinking, but in reality, it only celebrates these qualities after they become safe and widely accepted. Consider some famous examples. Galileo was imprisoned for his discoveries. Today, we praise him as a scientific genius. Van Gogh died in poverty, yet his paintings now sell for millions. Nikola Tesla revolutionized energy, but lived and died in obscurity. Society doesn't embrace intelligence when it challenges the norm. It only celebrates it in hindsight, once it's no longer threatening. So, if deep thinkers struggle to be accepted, what can they do? If you've ever felt misunderstood for thinking deeply, take heart. You're in good company. Throughout history, some of the most brilliant minds were not celebrated during their lifetimes. They were ridiculed, persecuted, or ignored. Their ideas were considered dangerous, disruptive, or simply too difficult for society to accept at the time. These thinkers had one thing in common: they were ahead of their time. And because of that, they suffered for their wisdom. Take Socrates, the father of Western philosophy. He spent his life questioning commonly held beliefs, encouraging people to think critically, examine their ideas, and embrace logic over blind tradition. But instead of being celebrated, he was put on trial, accused of corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. His real crime was encouraging independent thought. Given the chance to escape, Socrates chose to drink poison rather than abandon his principles. His famous last words, "The unexamined life is not worth living," sent a clear message. Society fears those who challenge its core beliefs. Then there's Galileo. His only crime was discovering the truth, that the earth revolves around the sun. By shattering centuries of religious dogma, he threatened the church's power, which relied heavily on controlling knowledge. Labeled a heretic, Galileo was forced to publicly recant his discoveries under threat of torture. For decades, he lived under house arrest, and his work was banned. Today, we recognize him as one of history's greatest scientists, but during his lifetime, he was rejected. Nietzsche's ideas were considered too radical and unsettling. He argued that traditional morality was flawed, that society was built on comforting lies, and that true strength came from creating one's own values. At the time, his work was dismissed as insane, ignored, or misunderstood. Today, his philosophy influences psychology, literature, and existentialism. Nikola Tesla was a visionary who dreamed of free, wireless energy for the world. Yet industrialists profited from electricity sales and saw Tesla's ideas as threats. Despite his genius, Tesla died alone and broke, while others built fortunes from his stolen inventions. His life shows how society often rewards businessmen and marketers over true visionaries. Alan Turing's work in cryptography helped end World War II and laid the foundation for modern computing and AI. Yet instead of being honored, he was persecuted for his personal life and chemically castrated for being gay. Tragically, he died by suicide at 41. Today, Turing is hailed as a hero, but in his time, society discarded him. While most historical deep thinkers were men, Hypatia of Alexandria was a rare exception, a philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer who challenged the male-dominated intellectual world of ancient Rome. She taught scientific reasoning and rational thought, which put her at odds with religious authorities. In 415 AD, she was brutally murdered by religious extremists who saw her as a threat. Her story highlights a crucial pattern. Intellectual progress often meets violent resistance. Each of these thinkers introduced ideas too advanced for their time. They were rejected, ridiculed, or punished while alive, but their ideas became the foundation of human progress. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence represents: change. This raises an important question. If history shows society resists deep thinkers, what can you do if you're one? Does this mean deep thinkers are doomed to loneliness? Not at all. It means you need to understand how to navigate society wisely. Not every place or person is ready for deep conversations. Save your most profound thoughts for those who truly appreciate them. You don't need millions to understand you, just the right ones. Seek out like-minded thinkers, whether through books, online communities, or intellectual circles. The greatest thinkers in history found ways to make deep ideas accessible. Einstein famously said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Learn to communicate your depth without overwhelming others. Schopenhauer once said, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." Deep thinkers see the world differently, and that will always make some people uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean you should stop thinking deeply. Society needs deep thinkers. It just doesn't always know how to embrace them. So, if you've ever felt like an outsider because of your thoughts, remember this: you are not alone. While society may fear deep thinkers, it is deep thinkers who push humanity forward. If this video resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced rejection for thinking deeply? Let's start a conversation. And if you want to explore more insights from history's greatest minds, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started.